This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Future State.
Hello and welcome to the Batman Universe Comic Podcast Season 13 opening episode, Future State, Part 1 of 4. I have with me my co-hosts.
This is Steph.
And this is Theo.
And I'm Ian, and I'm very excited to start out the year of Batman Universe Comic Podcast with my good friends Steph and Theo. We have 2 issues to cover today, plus Greater Gotham, and these are going to be a bit bigger because they advertise these as having backup stories, but they are actually really hefty stories, 15 to 20 pages each. So it's basically like we're reading 5 comics this week instead of 2. So we don't have any real news. We're expecting solicitations at the end of this week, possibly by the time this podcast drops, but it has not happened on Tuesday when we record. So we're just going to mention that we have a brand new developed website at TBU, the BatmanUniverse.net. I think it looks fantastic, really slick, and it loads really quickly. What do you guys think?
Love it. It's a totally different feel, but it's still TBU.
I am still getting used to the layout, but God, is that sucker fast?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all got used to clicking on the website and then doing something else a bit while it loaded. I think it's great. I think it really will bring the website a lot more functionality. We also have a new biography section where we can let the fans who come visit us know a bit more about ourselves. So if you want to check us out, you can always click on our names at the tops of articles or podcasts. And if you have any feedback, feel free to join our Discord community, linked on the sidebar or at the top. Actually, I think it's the top bar now. Or leave us a comment on Twitter. We're happy to respond or talk to you about Batman comics or Batman in general anytime. So, without further ado, let's get started. We have Future State, the next Batman number 1.
Future State, the next Batman. Story 1, the next Batman. Written by John Ridley, art by Nick Darrington. A masked thug runs through an alley carrying giant knives. He's accosted by Batman, who disarms him and takes him out. As the perp falls to the ground, Batman is confronted by 2 officers of the GCPD, who attempts to arrest him. Batman gets away as the cops realize he's captured a wanted serial rapist. Batman looks over the city and realizes that he shouldn't look at himself as a villain. He's Batman now, and Gotham City is his city to protect. In Little Santa Prisca, the Baneito gang is holding initiation. Nestor and Eddie, brothers, are looking for protection by joining. Enrico is giving them the pitch. To join in is simple. All they need to do is man up and blood in. Rico hands them a gun and a couple of Bane masks. Following the advice of his mom, Luke Fox visits a Gotham hospital to visit his sister Tam. As he walks in, he finds that she already has a visitor, his brother Tim. They argue over Tim's presence. Tim, who refers to himself as Jace now, has had enough and decides to leave. Luke is left alone with Tam, hoping that his unconscious sister did not hear the altercation between the brothers. Detective Chubb pays her former partner Whitaker a visit as he takes in some practice swings. She misses him and remembers him as being friendly to the masked vigilantes in the city. and questions him about a rumor of an ex-cop who might be helping the other side in doing one last job. Whitaker, however, brushes her off. The Bandidos are driving through hype territory when they recognize a hype soldier strolling alone down the street. Rigo tells the brothers, Nestor and Eddie, to mask up and prepare to complete their initiation. As they approach, Nestor takes aim, but is disrupted by his brother as he fires, missing the intended target. They turn their vehicle to run the fleeing guy over, but they're stopped by Batman. The vehicle crashes. As Nestor and Eddie takes off, Batman disarms Rico and the Bandido driver. Batman eventually catches up with the brothers, asking them to give up before the peacekeepers arrive. Nestor urges Eddie to shoot Batman, saying he will allow them into the gang. Eddie turns the gun over to Batman right as the peacekeepers arrive. The peacekeepers begin firing at the three masked beings. Batman uses a smoke bomb to get himself and the two brothers out of harm's way. With no deaths, Batman sees it as a good night. But will it last?
So, let's get our reactions first. This is something we've been hearing about for a year. We have the specifics going to us in the summer with Fandom. How does it feel now that we have Future State, the next Batman, in our hands now?
Liked that. I mean, unless you are paying attention to the extracurricular reading, you don't know for sure or at all who Batman is. And I like that. And I like that they're setting up a lot of different tangents to the story. It's definitely like...
Can you elaborate a bit? Because playing coy with Batman's identity is actually the thing I am frustrated with. So what
really
advantage does it give to you as a reader?
Well, you're thinking like, okay, who is it? So we have Luke, we have Tim. They possibly could be it. We got this partner that we haven't met yet, Tanaka. Maybe he's got something to do with something. Then there's the retired cop who's, I don't know. I think they're all parts of the story, and you have to wonder, well, what part are they? And I don't know. I like not having everything handed to me when I've opened the book. I like having to get to a different course to figure out what's going on.
I agree with Steph, because again, if it wasn't for Ridley, and DC doing what they typically do and ruining or spoiling the story by saying, oh yeah, it's Tim Fox, because again, all we knew, with the comings of Future State and John Ridley's Batman was that it was going to be someone of color. Everybody pinpointed on Luke, when it, again, spilling more about the story, they said that it was going to focus on the Fox family. So, of course, everybody, leans in and focuses on Luke, even after Tim arrives in the
I'd like to point out
Timeless.
that I did not lean in on Luke after Joker Warzone.
And so, when you see, he made me lose my train of thought. But people were leaning in, since you were giving these hints. But if DC had not spilled the beans on the story before they did, I think it would have been a great surprise going into this first issue, not knowing who Batman was.
Well, I think if you didn't know who it was, you still wouldn't know at the end of this issue.
No, you wouldn't. And that's what I'm saying is I kind of like that is I want to know, okay, because I kind of hate it when you open up a thing and it's like, oh, blank is blank now. And it's like, but why? So this, I get to see them in action, kind of free of prejudice, free of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe it is just prejudice, but free of bias, I guess.
Expectation?
And expectation, maybe. And so she's showing me what he can do. Okay. You're all right. You aren't as, I'm Batman. And he's like, I think I'm Batman, maybe. But he's trying. And I like that. And he's not done anything that I'm just pissed off about yet.
And again, for me, there is the way the story is written, just going through the pages, as Steph again mentioned earlier, there is nothing in there that says, oh, that's Tim. As a matter of fact, you get to the panel of the next day, and the way that Luke is talking to his mom, again, if you didn't know it was Tim based on, it would make you think, oh, it must be Luke because Luke is just waking up, in this afternoon. And that would have been great had DC not spilled the beans, even though we wouldn't have gotten the big reveal until the second issue. Sometimes DC shoots itself in the foot. Sometimes people want to be surprised. I know I do.
I mean, I agree that DC shoots itself in the foot all the time, but I actually... My philosophy going into this is that I want to be excited about this character. I agree you can overhype something. You can be like, oh, yes, this is the best Batman. This is the greatest Batman. And I think that DC is not doing that, and that's to their credit. But I would have liked to have Tim be a character in something. Maybe Batman, maybe a backup series in Batman, maybe a mini-series, sort of like Sword of Azrael, where they led into him becoming Batman so that I could know who he is.
Or at least get to know him.
Forever.
Because now...
There's no build at all.
Right.
Yeah,
I do not know who Tim is. Like, I know what Luke thinks of Tim, but I don't know how much of that is true. And I trust Luke because he's one of my favorite characters. So I am sort of biased against Tim right now. But I know Tim's supposed to be the hero. So I'm really struggling because I don't feel like I got enough about who Tim is. And because they're trying to make this a mystery, even though it's not a mystery to us who know about the cover for the second issue, I feel like I'm being played with. So I think this will probably fare better for me when I'm able to read all 4 issues together. But right now, I'm really struggling with the way they've chosen to structure this story.
Yeah, especially without any type of build, because again, in this continuity, Tim is either mentioned or seen in 2 panels in 2 separate issues. There was the Joker Warzone story where Lucius' wife tells him, we have to get Tim home. And then there's the one panel in Batman where Tim is just leaning on the wall. And between those 2 things, you know nothing. And even through this, it's, you're a third, maybe, a quarter of a way through the issue before Tim comes up again. And, again, if it wasn't revealed that this guy's going to be Batman, you surely wondering, well, who the hell is this?
Yeah, that's true. And I want to say I like the concept of not knowing because it gives you the opportunity to get to know Tim. But like you guys are saying, they really made no effort whatsoever of getting to know Tim before
I
revealing.
will say this. Like, we know about Batman that he's trying, that he's not too cocky, but he's also not timid. Like, he's like, I am Batman. But he's also not like, I'm the only Batman. Like, you can read a tone. And I think Ridley got a good tone for this Batman's voice. So we are getting to know him. I just feel like it's not...
Or we're getting to know him as Batman.
Right. And I want to know his relationships. I want to know a lot of things about him. So I'll give this to DC and Ridley that I'm intrigued. But I'd rather be excited than intrigued. And I know sometimes you can be excited and intrigued. But right now I'm just feeling, as I said, a little played with. Because they've built this up as big, but they haven't built it up in universe to be big, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, they got 3 more issues to get it done.
They do, and I'm looking forward to that. I kind of wish we hadn't started with Batman because I'm sort of I had the most expectations for this title, so I'm gonna sound like I'm not enjoying Future State, but I really am enjoying Future State. So I want to get that out there. I think Future State's exciting. I am excited about this, but I also think that for me, I really have a lot of expectations, and I'm working through the process of adjusting those as we go through, because we knew the idea of Future State, but we're being dropped into this very different world, and this is like the floundering around in the swimming pool of the story. So I just want to preface any, criticisms I have with the fact that this doesn't mean I think, oh man, Future State's the worst. Because I know there's a lot of negative buzz as well as positive buzz. There's people like, oh, I'm going to take a break from DC for two months. And I'm like, I kind of get that, but like there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. And I want people to try and give it a chance if they're willing to. Of course, if you're in a tight spot financially, or you're just not interested, or you're feeling burned out, this could be a good refresher period, and we'll come back to you in March with, the mainstream Batman stuff. But I think this is cool to think and talk about, and I am not at all, hating on Future State. I just have some criticisms, and I want to sort of have that nuance in there. I want to do a quick comparison to the previous new Batman. So we have Azrael, we have Dick, who's been Batman about 3 times now, although sometimes very briefly. And then we have Jim Gordon. So how does this Tim Fox Batman compare to our 3 previous Batman?
Oh, I don't know. I've only ever seen Alfred as Batman.
Oh, that's true.
I've avoided Azrael on purpose because I wasn't a fan.
One of these days, I'm going to have to share the radio drama with Nightfall with you guys.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good way to get through that story.
It was pretty good
to read it.
And then what was the other one?
Long story.
Bunny Bats, I also avoided because that was Scott Snyder. And then Dick, I haven't gotten around to that yet.
Oh man, you have to read the Black Mirror though. That's a fantastic story.
No, you don't read Black Mirror. You just read Grant Morrison's first volume of Batman and Robin, and just watch him and Damian go at each other. Damian tries to kill everybody, of course, and then Dick becomes his best friend.
I might have it. I just haven't read it yet.
Or you could just do Batman and Robin.
Anyway, or you could just do Black Mirror. I
do what I want.
Well, Theo, tell me what you think, because I assume you've read all 3 of these guys. I know you weren't the biggest fan of Jim Gordon, but you have read him.
Yes. So, I mean, it's still too soon. We're only 1 issue in, and it's tough making a good comparison just based on 1 issue. I don't think anyone will compare to Dick when Dick was wearing the cowl. But we still got 3 more issues of this story to see what Ridley can do. But it's a little bit too soon for me to make a fair comparison.
Well, I'm not going to make a full comparison, but here's my initial thoughts. So Azrael was really unstable because, he was really brainwashed and abused as a child. So he had all these psychoses. And his Batman was extremely sharp-edged because he was thematically a comparison to the anti-heroes of the Image comics of the 90s, because they were trying to show that Batman could be the better hero without killing or being really edgy, which is hilarious because Batman then became really edgy. Tim Fox is not that kind of edgy. He's very much a meat and potatoes type of Batman, very street level, very save people rather than be really into the vengeance. And I like that.
He's socially aware.
I will say, I do like that. I like how just he seems to want justice and to save people, and I really have been liking that so far.
Yeah, I mean, Ridley's a screenwriter, so you very much, I think, see this moment where he tells the kids that he's going to take them to child services, and that's like what we call a pet the dog or a pet the cat moment, where you really give the main character a sympathetic moment, and I thought that was well handled. Dick Grayson, of course, is just such a complex and likable character, and seeing him struggle with the weight of Batman, he felt much more of the intimidation, and you could call it imposter syndrome. That's a common. I don't like the term because it's so overused these days, but it very much fits Dick Grayson being Batman. He felt like an imposter, and Tim Fox has moments like that, but he doesn't. I mean, he wasn't as close to Bruce, so he doesn't have all that weight of history on him. So that's kind of a fresh take on that. And then you have Jim Gordon, who, was completely outside. He chose not to know that Bruce was Batman. And so he comes at Batman totally from the outside, and he's official. He's got the weight of the government behind him. And, Tim Fox is very much still anti-authority. If the corrupt cops come after him, he can beat them up, where Jim Gordon, if corrupt cops were fighting Jim Gordon, that was a much more difficult issue. So I think that Ridley has presented Tim Fox Batman in unique ways to the three previous replacements for Batman. So that's why I wanted to, because I had some thoughts as comparing him to those three, even though I do agree with Theo that, of course, there's plenty more to come. But I do think Ridley gave us some moments that we could compare to the previous Batman. What do you think happened with the Fox family? So we know that Tam is in a coma again, which I'm really frustrated by, because she was in a coma at the end of the New 52, and then she came out of the coma and she was running loose company. I was like, yes, because Tam Fox was one of my favorite parts of Red Robin with Tim Drake. But now she's in a coma again. Like, why is she in a coma? Why is Tanya, Lucius's wife, and Tim and Tam and Tiffany and Luke's mother, why is she working with the magistrate? What do you think has happened here?
I have no idea. Yeah, no clue. Just, I know that when stuff like this happens, you kind of have to pick your battles. And sometimes people go with what they're familiar with. So I don't know. We're waiting to see.
Yeah, this is a torn family. Lucius isn't in this issue, but I will assume, considering the conflicts going on between Luke and Tim, and then knowing what Mom's going through working for Nakano and the magistrate, that Lucius may not be on board with what's going on, and we'll see even more conflict as the issues progress. But most definitely right now, these are not the Cleavers. This is a torn family in some real conflict.
Yeah, that's a really good description. I think that clearly Tanya blames Batman, and I'm not actually 100% sure if it's Bruce Batman or Tim Batman for Tam being in a coma. So I'm assuming that we'll get some answer to that either in this series or in the Dark Detective series, which is sort of a flashback, as we'll get to in our second review. Well, technically our fourth review. There's also Luke Fox is in the backup to Dark Detective Grifters, and we have little hints of Lucius seems to still be alive. We don't see him, but he's mentioned. But he also seems to be sort of incapacitated in some ways. So maybe that's part of the same incident that put Tam in a coma as well. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on. I don't have a huge theory other than I'm hoping that it's all connected and that we'll have it revealed. I wanted to sort of get that information out there because it can get lost in a simple summary. Lastly, what do you think about Nick Darrington's art? We've seen Nick Darrington do Batman in Brian Bendis' Batman universe, and that was a very sort of Silver Age pulp science fiction adventure story. This is classic neo-noir, like Blade Runner, very much, techno punk coloring and really futuristic technology designs. How do you think Nick Darrington's art captures that?
I don't know about the futuristic side of it. It seems fairly mundane's not the word at all, but it seems fairly standard Batman technology as far as like even the baddies go. But the colors are so cool. Like, I really like the art in this one. I love the colors. I love the different colors of the different scenes. Like, no scene is really the same, and they each kind of have their own feel and tone, and I really, really liked it. And I liked the line art and the color blocking. It's just, I don't know. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I was really taken aback in a good way when I first saw the art, especially after reading some of the issues of Batman Universe. Yes, I actually read a Bendis book. Make note of that. But yeah, it definitely has some futuristic tones to it that I really enjoyed, and it made you know that you were not in the Gotham that you're used to reading. But I definitely enjoyed it. It was great art, great colors.
And the colorist, by the way, for this one is Tamara Bonvillain. Jordi Belair colored 2 of the stories that we're going to be covering today, and they really work together. I never got a sense in any of the stories that they took place in a different Gotham, even though we had very different artists and colorists in these stories and in the greater Gotham stories that we'll touch on. It all felt like it was part of the same world. And I did think it was funny that in every story here, they're fighting or brooding in the rain as the neon-soaked lights are around them. And I just thought that was kind of funny. It was very moody, very effective, but perhaps a little unrealistic that so much rain is happening in New Jersey. I have to admit, I was a little surprised when Nick Darrington was the one announced for this, because I thought they would go for a David Finch or a Tony Daniel or someone sort of much more, I don't want to say realistic, but much closer to a realistic style. Nick Darrington has got a very cartoony style, very much like the late lamented Darwin Cook. A really clean line and a really good sense for design that I love. And so I'm very excited to see him on this high-profile work, and I'm very disappointed that he's not doing any of the other issues. However, this one issue is a great debut, and I think that he does give the city and the characters a lot of weight. So definitely a lot of props for the art from me. Let's move on to our second story of the next Batman, Outsiders.
Outsiders, written by Brandon Thomas, art by Sumit Kumar. A police chase makes its way onto the Tri-Gate Bridge as Duke Thomas races to reach a barricade set across the lanes. As he and his passengers jump the barrier, a peacekeeper gives chase as his partner attempts to stop him from going outside of the jurisdiction. They're confronted by Katana, who chases them back across the barricade. After ensuring Duke and his passengers were safe and headed to a safe house, Katana goes to investigate rumors that the magistrate has infiltrated the area she's been protecting. Tatsu finds an abandoned building and, after taking out multiple peacekeepers on multiple levels, come face to face with their former fellow partner, Caliber, who, after receiving some upgrades, is now working with the magistrate. The two battle back and forth before Caliber gets the upper hand with the arrival of more peacekeepers. Before he can make a final blow against the downed Katana, a bolt of black lightning strikes the ground, taking out Caliber and the peacekeepers. The peacekeepers grab the fallen Caliber and they take off in a van, leaving the battered Katana alone. Another bolt of black lightning strikes in front of the startled Katana, leaving an electrified Jefferson Pierce, the black lightning, in front of her. Scared at the sight in front of her, Tatsu instinctively attempts to strike the being in front of her. She stopped. Black lightning has come with a warning. The magistrate has planted a spy amongst the group Duke has rescued.
So, what do you think of this Outsiders story? It very much feels like a continuation of what Brian Hill did with the Outsiders book in terms of cast and the relationships between Katana, Duke, and Jefferson. How does it work for you?
I wasn't loving Katana's metal outfit. Is that always something she's had, or is that from the Outsiders? Or is this something that's happened during Future State?
I think it's a Future State thing, because she did not look like that in Outsiders.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Future State thing.
I really think that was the only thing that really kind of threw me off. I enjoyed this. I liked their relationships. I like that Duke is kind of trying to distance himself, but do a right thing. I think that kind of gives him a character development that he didn't maybe have before. I kind of gave up on Outsiders, so I kind of knew who Caliber was, sort of. I had seen him in Outsiders and gave up. I really liked the level, the splash page with the different levels that Katana fights herself through. I thought that was really cool. I like that. I really like the art. I like the kind of mystery setup. Oh, what happened to, Jefferson? Why is he lightning? That's a little weird. And, is the baddie the guy with the glowing eyes? Probably. I don't know. For a little backup that I wasn't expecting anything from, I was pleasantly surprised by both the art and the story and the characters.
Okay, so make note. This is a second note from Theo of the episode. I absolutely love this story. So of the 3 stories in this issue, this was actually my favorite. And this means something considering I absolutely hate Duke Thomas as a character. But as Steph mentioned,
oh my goodness.
but as Steph mentioned, you actually got a little bit of character development with him. And that is something that you have not seen anybody else do. I had high hopes that Brian Hill would have been able to tackle that when he was writing Outsiders, but that didn't happen. But I absolutely loved this story. This was easily for me the best of the 3. Again, not saying that the other 2 were bad; they weren't. But this one was the one I enjoyed the most.
I hadn't thought about that because, all the attention was on the next Batman story. And I did enjoy the next Batman story. But I think that in terms of a pure craft and character setting, this is, I think, the best done of the stories in this issue. And it is... Sumit Kumar just does phenomenal work. There's a very famous page from Batman Universe by Bendis and Darrington where Batman and Dick Grayson as Nightwing fight their way through an entire ship of villains. And the scene where Katana goes through an entire house of villains is very much similar in terms of the storytelling. And it's magnificent. It's really wonderfully done. Sumit Kumar really makes everyone look futuristic but also appealing and cool. He's got a very good blend of thin lines and good rounded faces. It's just really appealing and well-crafted art, and the reveal of the Black Lightning. And maybe it's a bit on the nose to make Black Lightning literal lightning that is black. But it looked awesome, so I'm not going to complain.
And did it me, or did it have a little bit of a manga touch to it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was very
without the colors, of course, but it was just absolutely wonderful.
Katana, being a Japanese character, really fits within that, and the whole concept. I mean, for all of Hill's run of Outsiders, she constantly called Jefferson Raiden, wasn't it? She called him the god of lightning in Japanese mythology.
Correct.
So, I mean, this is kind of like taking that literally in an awesome but also hilarious way. So I have no idea where this is going to go next. We'll have to wait for 2 issues because these backups are split between 1 and 3, and then 2 and 4 have their own set of backups. But I am very excited for issue 3 to find out how this wraps up. I really hope that they keep Sumit Kumar on the art because it's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to Arkham Knights, the final story of the next Batman.
Arkham Knights, written by Paul Jenkins, art by Jack Herbert. In the wastelands of Gotham, 4 masked individuals take down a magistrate drone. Before they're able to get away, peacekeepers arrive, ready to dish out quick punishment. They're attacked, however, by a group of former inmates of Arkham Asylum, led by Astrid Arkham, the Arkham Knight. As they look to avoid the peacekeepers, they're also looking for another target, and it's on the move under the streets of Gotham. As the peacekeepers move in on them, the former Arkhamites, including Zaz, Clayface, Dr. Phosphorus, and Two-Face, follow their leader into the sewers of Gotham, where they find their target, Killer Croc, who's being attacked by magistrate drones. Astrid and the Knights of Arkham rescue the injured Croc and bring him to their base of operations, the place formerly known as Wayne Manor. As Croc heals in stasis, Astrid goes and does her best to confront Dr. Phosphorus, whose radiation continues to worsen and kill him. She promises her soldier that they will find a cure. Back in the wasteland, the peacekeepers, led by Peacekeeper 12, are striking terror against the citizens, looking to draw out the Knights. Their actions work, and the Knights enter the battle. After a valiant fight, the Knights triumphantly take out the peacekeepers, including Peacekeeper 12. They leave, heading towards a GCPD precinct. Their new target is there.
So I wanted to ask Theo, because this story has been getting either a lot of meh reactions or negative reactions from most of the fans I've talked to or listened to. But you had some unique perspectives in your review. So could you share some of the positives you found in this story for us?
No, I think this story was really nice, in my opinion. I think I might be the only person in the Batman universe and who did not have a negative take on this story. Yes, Astrid as the Dark Knight is still a dumb concept. When you look at this story, and especially compare it to what we got when she was first revealed to us in the pages of Tomasi's run of Detective, this story was not bad at all. You probably saw more character development of her in these few pages that you got in the entire 4 to 6 issues that the Arkham Knight got in Detective. Yes, she's still senile and crazy, and is still cult-like with her soldiers following her. But you got some good development in this story from how I read it, especially compared to what we got in Detective Comics. Now, again, this is, of the 3 stories, this is the least favorite of mine, but still, it was a good story. It wasn't. I must be seeing something different from everyone else, because I didn't think it was a terrible story at all.
I personally wouldn't call this a terrible story. I just was really struggling. I think that the Arkham Knight story in the Tomasi Detective run really biased me against Astrid, and she was definitely better here, but it feels like a different character. Like, I don't see how we got from the Astrid in Detective Comics to this Astrid. This Astrid's a good leader concerned about her men, whereas Astrid in Detective Comics was a cult leader who liked to sacrifice her men brutally. So I'm just like, this is a very different character. I'm struggling to see the connection. So the art was strong. It reminded me of Fernando Pasaran, who isn't my favorite, but I've grown to like him more after his work on Deathstroke and Hawkman. I don't have a ton to say, other than I think it's kind of funny that these guys take out Peacekeeper 12, who I think is the lowest ranked of the Peacekeepers. Most of the Gotham stories have either the presence or the threat of one of the numbered Peacekeepers, 1 through 12, with Peacekeeper 1, of course, being the most terrifying, being the one who killed Batman. So I think it'll be really interesting to put together the different kinds of Peacekeepers and how they are defeated throughout this whole Gotham future state world. Any other comments we have on Arkham Knights before we give our ratings?
My dislike for this one was just a lot more personal. Like, my personal flavor isn't giant groups fighting. Like, I didn't really like Suicide Squad. I don't read Justice League. I just don't do well with giant groups. I struggle through Teen Titans sometimes. They're not that many, and Damien's there, so I sacrifice. But, I'm not a big fan of the big groups. I don't understand why they're fighting for good. I can understand maybe a few villains having a good heart. Like, we've seen Clayface turn about sometimes. We've seen Dr. Phosphorus in the past turn about. But Zaz is a psychopath. He would never fight for saving people. And I hate that Two-Face is there, because Two-Face was turning a new leaf. He wasn't, and now he's going around killing people. I mean, they're baddies, but still, anyway. I was personally offended by this story.
But you got to remember, Astrid is even though she's the daughter of our good friend Arkham, she easily could have been a patient. And you also got to remember, she was raised around these guys, and she truly feels that her mission is going to save Gotham. She still has this mission of seeing the sun rise over the city, whatever this sun is supposed to be.
And do is wait a few hours.
Yeah, and they bought into it. They bought into
I just
it.
think that so many of them to buy into it, and
I have a very specific idea of Zaz, and he is an unredeemable monster. He lives to kill, and I think that Zaz is just too far gone from that.
Well, I think that that's going to be revealed, because if you remember, there were a few panels in there where Zaz, countered what Astrid was saying, whether she was talking to Harvey, which, Zaz says, oh, he's not one of us, and he seems like he's going to be the problem child. So I wouldn't be shocked nor surprised if.
Then why have him there? Throw him in prison.
To cause problems.
I think it's gonna. I think Zaz is not necessarily a plant, but he has his own ulterior motive that Astrid doesn't see yet, and once she does, it's going to come to blows. I think that's how this is going to end. I think that I think ultimately all of them, with the exception of Zaz, see themselves as doing good. They're protecting the wastelands, and they're gathering more soldiers to continue doing that. But I think in the end, Zaz might reveal himself, because again, there were those few panels where he seemed to counter what the leader wanted. Harvey was turning over a new leaf, of course. Croc was turning over a new leaf. Phosphorus, of course, he is who he is. But I think in the end, this is a funny group of fellas that we're dealing with here. This is the different type of Suicide Squad.
I think that's a very astute and thoughtful take on the story. I maintain that it still didn't connect with me, but I think that
you hate it.
As I said, I don't hate it. I'm trying to think. Do I hate any of the stories we're covering today? No, I don't hate any of the stories. This is just definitely my least favorite of anything we're covering, including Greater Gotham. So let's get to our ratings. Out of 5 Benelitos masks, how would you rate The Next Batman overall, all 3 stories?
I did like the Benelitos. Sure. I'm going to have to give it 3.5, because the Arkham story kind of drug it down. I love the second story, and the first one was just kind of middle in the road. So that averages to about 3.5.
I gave it a 4 in my review on the website, and I'm going to stick with that for the reasons I gave throughout our analysis of the 3 stories. So 4 out of 5 Benelito mask.
I am also with Steph. Overall, I thought that the second story was very good. The first story was good, but my expectations mean that I think it should have been better, because it's supposed to be a big splash, and I think it was more just a decent story. And then, of course, I just didn't have a very good reaction to the last story, so overall it's better than average. And I would say even significantly better than average, but I wouldn't put it at the 4 out of 5, because to me a 4 out of 5 is a very high rating, because I don't remember giving a 5. So 3.5, which I believe gives us an average of 3.75-ish out of 5 Benelitos masks.
Wait, you never given a book a 5?
I don't think so.
I never have.
Oh, Annual 2.
That's as close.
2.
I think. Did I give that one a 5? I might have given that one a 5.
I don't
Annual
think
2
I
was definitely a 5.
Past.
No, you weren't. But Annual 2 was definitely a 5 for me.
Yeah. If I didn't, I should have.
I don't know. A 5 to me is just something I don't feel. I feel like a 5 is something that I should give maybe once or twice in my life, just because it should be that good. So
I've already qualified that a 5 must have a Batcat wedding, and so I may never give a 5.
Well, I mean, there is a Batcat wedding in Brave and the Bold back in the 70s.
And technically, there was one in annual too because they were married and had a child. And,
Well, but you have to see the wedding, I think Steph is saying.
Yeah.
You got to see the wedding.
Okay.
Well, they had wedding bands.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about reviews and community. Our new website is full of bells and whistles for you to press and subscribe and join our staff and talk to us through Discord or Twitter. So go ahead and do that. We'd love to hear what you thought about this episode. Send us a message at any of our various social medias or at our email, tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. If you're a patron, please let us know on our Patreon page. We are tossing around the idea of setting up polls for selecting the TBU extra issues. So if you think that'd be a good idea, please let us know. Leave us a review on various services, YouTube, Stitcher, or iTunes, and we'll be happy to read your comments and reviews on air next title. Let's move to our next review, which is Future State Dark Detective #1. The first story is called Bruce Wayne is a Dead Man, and that's written by Mariko Tamaki, drawn by Dan Mora, and colored by Jordi Belair. The timeline of this story shifts between the past and the present. Now, Bruce Wayne wanders the streets of Gotham, presumed dead as both Batman and Bruce. Then, he is shot by Peacekeeper 1 while dressed as Batman. He's sewn up in a back alley by a corrupt surgeon, and then in the present, Bruce stops a mugging, but the magistrate's forces chase him down instead of pursuing the muggers. When he sheds his civilian disguise to become Batman, but this time a stripped-down sort of urban combat Batman instead of the classic look that we're familiar with, he's shot in the leg. Bruce vows to take back the city using his knowledge of the money and technology that the magistrate took from him. So, what do we think of our first look at Bruce Wayne in the world of Future State?
I love it. It's so gritty, and he looks so good in a hoodie, and he's got stubble, and it looks really cool. But as for the story, it was good too. It's intriguing. It's like why I didn't quite understand because he gets shot, but he's Bruce. He dresses up as Bruce with a gunshot wound, and then suddenly he's dressed up as Batman getting treated by the weirdo doctor. It's a little confused by that. But no, I liked it. It's very bright, very, like you said, kind of techno sheep or whatever. Robot sheep. Whatever that movie was.
Blade Runner.
I know, Blade Runner. No, it was very cool. And he's still Batman. He's still just ambitious. He would be Batman if he was a paraplegic, so not having money and shot multiple times is not going to stop him. So I liked it, and I liked the feel, I liked the tone and the voice, and I'm interested to know where she's going to go with this.
Yeah, this was a good first issue. Seeing Batman, but not. I think a lot of what Steph says, it makes a lot of sense. It's going to be interesting to see how Tamaki, continues and finishes this up over the next 3 issues. There was some mishaps. There was the, hey, got shot in the head. Got shot in the leg. Next thing you know, he has the cowl on. But it's going to be interesting. I know I said earlier, this is Batman without. It's going to be interesting to see how he operates in this new Gotham, with his helmet on. So good first issue.
I also liked the issue, although as I was writing the summary, I noticed that really not very much at all happens in the issue. There's a lot of monologue in a very nice sort of Bruce voice, but it doesn't take up much space. So I kind of wish they'd done this as a backup, like an actual backup of about 10 pages. On the other hand, the art was phenomenal. I mean, one thing I think we can say about Future State is they have given us a true delight to the eyes with Dan Mora and Nick Darrington and Sumit Kumar. And then our next story is illustrated by Carmine Di Giandomenico. who I think people will remember from back when I first started on the podcast, was drawing the James Robinson Detective Comics run. And I was consistent in saying, I hate that run, but I love the art because I am a big fan of Carmine, and I think he does fantastic work here too. So this is just a future state that we can look at and just have these beautiful images that the comic artists are serving up for us. What do you think about the comparison between the artists? Does it feel like the same world to you, or does it feel like each artist is creating a new future Gotham?
Talking about the colors and such, or I mean, no, wow.
Just the whole thing. Are you
talking about all the stories?
Well, specifically, I want to talk about
these two,
the next Batman and then Dark Detective. So those two title stories.
Right. The colors, the bright colors definitely connect them. Like I was saying, for the next Batman, I didn't really see all that much in the future. Maybe I just missed it. And in that case, it was very subtle. But this one, there's definitely a lot more tech, like on the walls and flying. There's a lot of drones in the sky and, a lot of billboards for weird future things. So in the color sense, it's very connected. I wonder if the presence of technology kind of indicates when the story takes place, if they thought
could also be
detailed.
the district that they're in, because I think that the next Batman really focuses on more of the really run down districts where the people are more desperate.
It could be. But yeah, so the colors really do. I'm not seeing it in the literal drawing of the environment, but definitely in the colors. I don't get a distinctly different feel though. Like it's not like being doused with cold water going from one story to the other. It kind of flows, sort of.
Yeah, I get the feel between Darrington and Moore that we're in the same Gotham. You could definitely tell that they're in different areas, between Bruce and Tim, but it's Gotham, and I see the futuristic pieces throughout both of the stories and the two different issues. So yeah, I can see that we're in Gotham.
I tend to agree. This does feel like different parts of a huge city, but I like the sense of exploring different parts and seeing different sites, but feeling like I'm still in, my favorite fictional city of Gotham, even though I'd never actually want to live there. This is cool. I am very much looking forward to the next issue to find out how Bruce, becomes... I'm assuming he goes underground. Now, it's possible that this ends in the actual death of Bruce Wayne, but I'm hoping not, because I'd like Bruce to still be around.
Why would you say that?
Say what?
Bruce can't die. This is impossible.
There's no
Bruce
true
died
deaths
in
in
Annual
comics.
number 2. He totally can die.
But no.
He also died. Let him die. I mean, who died instead dead?
My thought, what I was thinking when I was reading this whole stupid thing? I was like, okay, listen, everything's gone to crap. He can go get Selina now. I mean, it can't get any worse. At least they could be miserable together. Ah!
Well, we'll have to figure out what's going on with Selina, because she has her own story
she has her own
next
story.
week.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to move on to our next story, Grifters. Number 1, written by Matthew Rosenberg, penciled by Carmine Di Giandomenico, colored by Antonio Fabella. The title is No Future Past. Cole Cash, the high-tech thief/mercenary called Grifter, stabs a man, threatening him with a gun over a card game, and the GCPD picks him up after a fairly large brawl in the bar and on the streets. In custody, Cole meets Luke Fox, another captive of the police van, because of his long-gone days as Batwing. Luke convinces Cole to break them out, which he does in spectacularly difficult improvisational fashion. Cole takes Luke to his apartment, where he threatens Luke for the real reason he wants to get out of Gotham. Luke refuses to say, but gives Cole $50,000. On their way out of the city, they run into the Black Mask Syndicate and flee in a hail of bullets right into the Huntress's home. So, like the previous story in this issue, this feels like it's a bit more... There is a lot more action. So a lot of the page space is used up in gunfights, but I feel like Cole is not super strategic. He's just kind of throw a bunch of bullets and running and punching until you get out of the situation type of fighter. He's very much not Batman. So it felt a little aimless at times and could have been tightened up a bit. So I almost wish these two stories had been backups to the next Batman and maybe release Outsiders and Arkham Knights as their own issue. I don't know. I have a theory that all this stuff was actually going to be a bunch of 2-issue miniseries, but they decided to package them as larger issues to sort of get readers used to the idea of anthology issues and backups for their initiative in March. But what did you guys think of Grifters?
Was the bromance I never knew I needed. This was absolutely fabulous. Like, yeah, the action might have been aimless, but I think there's like relationship building in there. Like, although Luke's knocked out for most of the escape because he hit him too hard. But I thought it was absolutely delightful. The art is just so much fun. The banter is so much fun. The chaos is so much fun. I think that the space taken up was totally worth it, and I enjoyed reading this. And he's kind of like a I guess he smokes, but a less smoking, more American Constantine, sort of. But I liked him. I liked him a lot. I still don't know what Grifter's deal is or who he is, but I like him.
Well, this is very similar in character to the last series I read by Rosenberg, which was Hawkeye Freefall for Marvel. Rosenberg does a ton of stuff for Marvel, but apparently he's not exclusive. Hawkeye, Clint Barton, in that series is very much a fast-talking, improvisational guy who gets in over his head and then just shoots until he gets out. And so I think Rosenberg kind of developed a flair for that. And he's always been a really good, witty dialogue writer. So I definitely agree with you there. There's a lot of good relationship building between Cole and Luke. Theo, what do you think?
Is it ironic or coincidence that in both of these books that we reviewed this week, that the second story turns out to be the best story of the issue? Because this was absolutely great. I love this story. Yeah, there's definitely a bromance brewing between Grifter and Luke. If there was one thing that drew me off, and I guess once Future State is over, we'll have to figure out where things fit in, is that, just the week before in reading the next Batman, Luke is at the hospital holding Tam's hand, and now here it is, he's under arrest and, needing help to get out of Gotham. So it's going to be interesting to see how these stories stack up in the timeline of Future State. But it was absolutely a great story, and it was absolutely wonderful seeing Huntress at the end of it. I know as we go into March and we get back into the present with the two main books, Dan Moore has a cover with the Huntress in it, and so seeing her in this story as it ended means that she is likely to have some prominence once we get back to the present time in March. But this, again, absolutely great story. It was my favorite one of this issue.
I would agree. I think this was a much punchier story, and just because there's actual interaction between Cole and Luke, whereas Bruce is almost always by himself or kind of in his own head in Dark Detective, Grifters was just high octane. And I mean, I've already gone embarrassingly at length about how much I love Carmine's art, but the way he draws the gun battles with just the flashes, and it's almost like confetti, but it's like deadly. So there's just this sense of menace, but also beauty in the action. And I'm a huge Huntress fan. She's been gone for so long. I think the last thing Huntress was really, she's popped up a couple times in like a background shot, or in Detective Comics, she was like in a panel in one of the stories. But actually in a story last time was in Constantine, the Hellblazer by Tim Seeley. And that was like 3 years ago, I want to say. Maybe 2 years ago. But it's been a long time. And so having her back, I am very, very excited to see what happens both in this story and in Detective Comics, because Dan Mora drew her on the cover of the first issue of Detective Comics in March. And so I think it's really cool that in Dark Detective, even though it's not by the team that's going to be writing, that they seem to have lined up that character so she's going to be in Dark Detective and then transitioning to Detective Comics. So that's really kind of, it just feels really clever the way the editorial have positioned this story to lead into March. So very excited. Let's give...
Well, hold on. I do want to talk about that a little bit. Like, I don't know. Do you really I guess I'm just talking to someone who's thrice bitten, so much shy. Do you think that they've actually plotted it all out and all the books are working together, and that Luke being in two places really makes sense because of the timeline?
I do.
That we don't know
the
yet?
reason I say that is because I read this very illuminating interview with Mariko Tamaki, and she said that the Batman books for Future State are a real machine. Like, they have this whole where things slot in and come out and interact thing going on with the books. And I can see the beginnings of that. Now, I can't tell you how it all works together yet because we've only seen the first 2 or 3 weeks of these stories. So a lot of them are still spinning up. But I can sense that there's a coordination going on here. And so I do think that it's on purpose.
Okay.
I would agree. I as we got through these first 2 weeks, like I said, the Grifter story really threw me off, considering the week before we saw Luke, walking freely in the hospital. But, as reviewers, we get to see preview issues and you kind of get a better feel of where they're going with Future State. And I definitely think, by the time it all is said and done, we'll be able to get this overall story together. At least I hope we can, to where we can, go in and pick out all of the stories, not just the main one, but the backups as well, and see how they fit together, and perhaps even put them in chronological order so that it can make a lot more sense.
All right.
Do you think when it's collected, they'll put it in chronological order?
Oh, that's a really good question. Probably not, but maybe, because I hear they are doing bigger trades for Future State.
Who knows?
I don't know. That'll be very curious.
I will.
Note to DC, do us a favor and make that happen.
That would be really cool. I think that would actually be a very exciting thing for fans. Let's give a rating out of 5 masks. So Grifter, of course, wears a mask, and he forces Luke to wear a blindfold. So out of 5 masks, what do we give Dark Detective as a whole?
I really, really liked it. And I know Dark Detective was kind of lacking dialogue and plot progression, but it wasn't bad. Like, I think I enjoyed both of them very much. I think I might give this a 4 out of 5, just because of how much I really liked the Grifter story, and I wasn't disappointed by the first one. So I give it a 4.
Yeah, it's most definitely a 4 for me. It's a 4 for me just on the art alone. But again, great story with the Grifter and Luke, and a pretty decent story by Tamaki with Bruce. So most definitely 4 out of 5.
I am going to do something that, because I'm running the podcast now, I am going to allow myself to do. And that is, I'm giving this a 3.75 because I can't quite bring myself to give it a 4. I'm much more interested in endings than beginnings, but this is really good. And I do think it was more enjoyable overall than Next Batman and the backup for Next Batman.
That's terrible.
It's terrible. So I can't give it a 3.5, but I am going to give it a 3.75, which I think gives this a 3.9.
9. It's 4. That's a 4, dude. It's 4.
You can round if you want, but I refuse. So that gives us, let's see, what's it called? a mode of 4 for Dark Detective. Let's talk a little bit about Greater Gotham. We just have 2 issues that we decided were relevant to Greater Gotham for these 2 weeks, and that was Future State Harley Quinn, written by Stephanie Phillips, and then Future State Robin Eternal, written by Megan Fitzmartin, drawn by Eddie Barrows. What do we think of Harley Quinn?
I loved the art. I was a pretty big fan of the story, and the more I got into it, the more I love seeing psychologist Harley. And so where she's kind of brought to this point where the only thing that she was kind of allowed to do because she's tied to the chair is be a psychiatrist, and she can't help herself. It was interesting. I very much liked it. I'm a huge fan of anime, and the art was just so manga anime style. I'm super disappointed that it's a Black Mask story, but I guess because of the movie right now, we can't really divorce Harley from Black Mask. But it was good. I really, really enjoyed it.
The art saved this issue. The art was wonderful. The story for me was pretty meh. But again, I am the unqualified great Harley hater here. So unless it's Harleen, I wasn't a fan of this again. But I am quite biased as not being a fan of Harley Quinn. But the art was beautiful.
I'm kind of weird in that I really like the story. This is basically Silence of the Lambs with Harley Quinn as Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, and Scarecrow as Clarice, which is kind of a weird flip in so many ways, because Scarecrow is the actual, serial killer bad guy psychologist, whereas Harley is also a bad guy psychologist, but she's not nearly as into the death and destruction. Usually, at least, especially not these days. I've become more of a fan, especially since I did reviews for Harley for quite a while. And I'm still doing reviews for the White Knight Harley, which I would recommend. This art confused me because there was a lot of stuff that was really beautifully drawn, but it was framed in such a way that it felt off kilter, and my eyes didn't know where to go in the frame. So I was visually confused while I was still enjoying the story. And I'm very excited to see what happens next, because Harley's clearly gotten herself where she wants in this stage of her plan. She's gotten a lot of privileges. So now I want to know, we're assuming she gets free, but what is she going to do? What is her goal in that freedom? So there's a lot of really cool motivational stuff in this. And this is the author, the writer, but not the artist, who's going to go on to do the Harley Quinn series. So I'm very curious to see how that goes and whether or not the Harley Quinn series in March is going to be in continuity, because the last series by Sam Humphries and the Connor Palmiotti team was not in continuity. That was very wacky and breaking the fourth wall, so it didn't really fit into continuity on purpose. I'm wondering if Stephanie Phillips is going to really put this in continuity, which would be a new state for the Harley series. Yeah, I was a fan of this, even though the art didn't quite work as well for me. Let's talk a bit about Robin Eternal. This is starring Tim Drake with supporting characters Stephanie Brown as Spoiler/Batgirl and Darcy, who is a member of the We Are Robins. Now, I checked. She's not one of the original members, but there were huge scenes where all the Robins got together, so we're assuming she's one of those. What did you think of Robin Eternal?
Of the 4 we read, like the 4 books we read, this was my least favorite. Is this the guy that did the a lot of the art for a lot of the art for Detective Comics?
Yes, he was the main artist for Detective Comics.
I didn't like that art. I don't like this art. No, I can't stand it. Tim looks so funky. All the faces look like distorted.
Well,
I don't.
He's old. He's older, Steph. Come on.
You shouldn't be coloring if you're having a stroke or something. I don't know.
A stroke?
I don't know if you're old. What's your excuse? I don't know. I was not a fan. It's not my favorite. I can understand that people like it. It's not my cup of tea. It's the reverse of the Harley one. I absolutely adored the Harley one. And you know, you guys didn't. That's okay. We are allowed to be different. But I liked the characters. I had no idea who Darcy was. She was kind of, I felt
she's
a
brand
little
new
bit like
character, so nobody knew.
Okay, good. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. Resin is very stinky, and you should not be around liquid resin without a gas mask, so they're going to die. But other than that...
Another thing I should mention is that Darcy is deaf, so actually Tim uses some sign language in some of the scenes, which I really liked.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah. It had a lot of personality and character beats, and the plot was kind of meh. It's like, resin made from Roz juice. This is great, but whatever.
Roz juice?
What's the Roz juice? What's Roz juice called again?
Lazarus Pit.
Lazarus Pit juice.
Roz juice.
Like...
that's classic.
But it was a little much for me, but it was still enjoyable. I don't really. It wasn't a bad read at all. It just wasn't my favorite of the four.
Okay, so fans, it would behoove me if you all don't get Roz Juice trending after this episode drops. Do it. I love this story. This was a fun book. So again, of all the Robins, Tim is probably my least favorite. But this was an absolute great issue. And, the portrayal of Tim in this book as Robin was done damn near perfectly. And I absolutely loved it. I loved Eddie Barrows' art. But again, I also loved it when he was on Detective Stuff. But yeah, the entire idea of, Tim's particular mission as we go through Future State and Gotham, and it seems like, each character is tackling a different part of the conglomerate that is the magistrate. But this particular one seems to be quite exciting. It's going to be interesting to see how things move forward between him and Steph, because it seems like those two aren't together when you go through that dialogue. But the story and the way it ended, not to spoil it, but the way the story ended was absolutely great. I'm actually, can't wait for the next issue to come out. But yeah, great story, great art.
I do understand where Steph is coming from. I found Eddie Barrows a bit of an acquired taste, but I did acquire him. I've gone back and read his Nightwing, written by Kyle Higgins back in the New 52, and of course I was a huge fan of Detective Comics, and so I'm very familiar with him, and there are some things that I'm just like, I wouldn't draw that if I could draw as well as Eddie Barrows, but Eddie Barrows has, his tastes, and he's really good at getting these dark action scenes. Like sometimes when he's doing some of the more tender moments, it can be a little odd, but this is a dark story, and I think it really works for that. And he even does get some good tender moments between Tim and Darcy, and some emotional, awkward moments between Tim and Steph. And I particularly like how Megan Finch-Martin, who's a writer for the Supernatural television show, and she also does a really fun podcast called Wine and Comics, where she reads comics and drinks wine, appropriately named. And she just gets Tim's character. He's very loyal. He has a real tunnel vision about heroism, where he, loses a sense of self-preservation and just goes in for the victory to save people. He's very awkward around Steph. He doesn't know the right thing to say, so he does dumb stuff, which I think is very appropriate for Tim. And for a brand new writer to comics to get Tim so well, and she does a really good job with Steph, and she creates this brand new character of Darcy, who I really liked. I was really impressed. I was very excited, and I was, of course, inclined to like it because I love Tim and I love Steph, but I was impressed. I'm very excited to see what happens. I hope that Tim, Steph, and Darcy can have a major victory in decreasing the magistrate's supply of these massive war droids, and it's possible that this happens relatively early because we haven't seen any of these big war droids fighting the forces of Batman and the heroes so far. So it's possible that Tim was successful and took out the supply of big droids so that they only have their peacekeeper forces.
The ciphers.
The
cipher, the cybers,
I think
cybers. What they call them?
Cybers is what I called them.
Did
Unless
you get the
this
sense
takes place
that he
ahead. I mean, later.
I mean, it could also happen later, but I'm wondering. It could happen either way. I mean, it could happen just before the big climax, or it could happen early on, so it takes out some of their bigger guns, so they can't bring them to bear. So, Greater Gotham so far has been quite good. Worth checking out. Worth collecting. Just really good art, even if you may not be a fan of one or the other, as we had voices that didn't really appreciate them, but they were skillful. I definitely think that all of us appreciate there was skill, even if it wasn't to our taste. But yeah, Greater Gotham and Gotham in general seems like it's really a fun place to be during Future State for readers, not for the people in the stories, let's be clear. So, let's get to listener feedback.
Sorry to interrupt, Master Booth. Ringing your phone now.
This needs my attention.
On the Discord, we had several feedbacks and bits of conversation. So Daniel Goldberg mentioned, hey Ian, thanks for the shout out on episode 313 regarding his disdain for Bengal's art. If it wasn't clear, I actually really did like number 104 a lot, especially considering number 104 and number 105 in tandem. I thought the entire closeout to this arc was just fantastic. So thank you. We had a really good Twitter conversation with Theo and I and Daniel about this issue, because there were 3 different artists and it was sometimes very jarring. But I think Theo and I appreciated the art, whereas Steph and Daniel didn't like that very much. So you were not alone, Daniel. And I also really enjoyed the way the characters worked together and it all flowed into 105 as a conclusion. I asked a question in the podcast channel. This is me, by the way. Do people think that the return of Dick Grayson makes the Uberrick storyline worthwhile? Theo mentioned that it was too early to tell. Daniel said that I'm dubious. And Tony mentioned that the Dan Jurgens stuff was all right. I think he did a decent job, given the story points the previous writer gave him. The Nightwings were decent. Their plots, I think, were more interesting than Uberrick. And I would agree with all those things. I think it is too early to tell. I am also kind of dubious. I don't think it was worth spending nearly 2 years on Uberrick. But I also agree with Tony that the Nightwings were fun. I liked getting to know them. I thought they were cool guys and definitely more interesting than Uberrick. I'm
upset when he broke up with B, because at least B was like a connection to that, and it was like, okay, so at least maybe it wasn't totally for waste. And then they break up and he goes out to be without her, and it's like, okay, so like, no, there's literally nothing of Uberrick left. It was a waste of time.
And here's my thing about those two breaking up. I would have been okay with them breaking up if they just had an argument and, you know what, I'm done, I'm out. But the rationale behind Dick breaking up with her is a total crock. It's a cop-out. To use Bruce's excuse, you know, that you can't be who you are and be happy and being that, I just think that's a total cop-out, considering the person Dick Grayson has always been. And for them to just throw that as the reason for he and B to no longer be together, that was just a cop out for me. I would have rather have seen her get killed than to just use that as an excuse for them to not be together anymore. I just think it was sloppy. Just sloppy.
All right. If you have opinions about Uberrick or about Future State, please let us know. Reach out to us on Discord. We're always checking that. Hit us up on Twitter. Our handles are all in the show notes for this episode. And we're also available, as previously mentioned, at the email tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. So feel free to send us any questions you have, and we'll be happy to read them on the program. We are also very grateful for our patrons and supporters. Patrons at the level for the shout-out are Gerald Green, Joshua Lappin-Bertoni, Rob O, Real No Deuces, Tim Garassi, Robert Lewis, Stephanie Mouse, Donovan Morgan Grant, Stanton's Grave, Donald Townsend, Ed Grouse, Theodis Wright, Hannah Garr, Captain America, Mary Garrett, Austin Davis, Johnny McCloskey, and Brendan Roberts. Thank you all for your support. You help us to keep giving you this new season, season 13, starting with a 4-episode Future State opening. So we will see you next time. I've been Ian.
This is Steph.
And this is Theo.
Thank you for listening, and come back for more Future State.